The battlefield was silent now. 3 days had passed since the last gunfire echoed across the broken landscape of Viridian 7. The planet's surface was a graveyard of metal and flesh, where soldiers from a dozen alien species lay scattered among the wreckage of war machines and shattered bunkers. Among the ruins, something massive stirred. Kale's breathing came in shallow, painful gasps. Each breath sent waves of agony through his torn body. He was a Vralthian warhound, 12 feet of engineered muscle and armor-plated hide designed to be the perfect weapon. 6 powerful limbs, razor-sharp claws and cybernetic enhancements that made him faster and stronger than any natural creature had the right to be. But none of that mattered now. He was dying. The heavy chains still bound him to the destroyed bunker where his handlers had left him. Kale remembered their faces as they boarded the evacuation ships. Commander Talavek had looked at him once, calculated the cost of saving a damaged warhound, and made his decision. The cold Vralthian officer had simply walked away. "Leave it," Talavek had said. "We can grow another." The other soldiers had followed without question. To them, Kale was equipment. Expensive equipment, yes, but ultimately replaceable. When the battle turned against them and the evacuation order came, they took what was valuable and left everything else behind. Kale was just another piece of broken machinery cluttering the battlefield. Other alien soldiers had passed by in the days since. A group of insectoid Threxians had skittered past, their compound eyes barely glancing at the dying creature. A pair of crystalline luminars had floated by, their musical voices discussing tactical positions while ignoring the warhound's weak growls. Even the reptilian Sarkons, who claimed to value honor above all, had seen Kyle and continued on their way. He was alone. For the first time since his creation in the breeding pods of Vralthia Prime, Kale was completely alone. No handlers shouting commands. No pain compliance signals forcing him to obey. No missions to complete. Just the cold reality of abandonment and the slow approach of death. Kyle's enhanced hearing picked up new sounds. Engines, ground vehicles. Different from the Galactic Union's standard transports. These had a rougher quality, more mechanical and less refined. The vibrations felt wrong somehow, out of sync with what he had been trained to recognize. Humans. Kyle had heard of them. The newest species to join the Galactic War, arriving only months ago with their primitive technology and strange ideas. The other soldiers talked about humans with a mixture of amusement and confusion. They fought with outdated weapons, used inefficient tactics, and wasted resources on the strangest things. 2 figures appeared through the smoke and debris. They wore combat armor marked with red symbols that Kale's tactical database identified as medical insignia. Both were small by galactic standards, barely reaching 6 feet tall. One was male, broad-shouldered with kind eyes visible through his helmet's visor. The other was female, slender and quick-moving as she navigated the rubble. "Deho, over here!" the female called out. Her voice carried concern, not the cold efficiency Kale expected from soldiers. The male human Deho approached carefully. His hand rested on his sidearm, but his body language showed caution rather than aggression. "Easy there, big guy," he said softly. "We're not going to hurt you," Kyle growled. It was meant to be threatening, but it came out as a pathetic whimper. His vocal systems were damaged, and he lacked the strength for anything more. The female human, whose name patch read Hana, pulled out a scanning device. She ran it over Kyle's body, her expression growing darker with each reading. Multiple internal injuries. His cybernetics are failing. These chains have cut into his limbs. "Tiho, he's been here for days. Can we save him?" Deho asked. "I don't know, maybe, but it'll take everything we have." Hana looked up at her companion. "The others won't like it. The Vralthians already told us not to waste resources on damaged warhounds." Kale's mind processed their words through waves of pain. They were discussing saving him, actually debating whether his life was worth the effort. The concept was foreign. Since his earliest memories in the conditioning pods, he had never been treated as something worth saving. He was a weapon. Weapons were maintained when useful and discarded when broken. Deho knelt beside Kale's massive head. The human was so small compared to the warhound that Kale could have snapped him in half with one bite. But the human showed no fear. Instead, he reached out and gently touched Kyle's scarred muzzle. "Look at his eyes, Hana," Deho said quietly. "There's someone in there. He's scared. He's in pain. He understands what's happening to him." Hana crouched beside her companion, looking into Kale's eyes. The warhound stared back, seeing something in these humans that he had never seen in his Vralthian handlers. They looked at him with compassion. "The Vralthian said he's just a weapon," Hana said, but her voice held doubt. "Anything that can hurt like this is more than just a weapon," Deho replied firmly. He activated his communicator. "Command, this is Corporal Deho. We've found a survivor, Vralthian Warhound, critical condition, requesting immediate evacuation and medical support." The response came crackling through. "Negative, Corporal. Vralthian Command has classified their Warhounds as equipment. No medical resources to be expended on salvage." Deho's jaw tightened. "Command, I'm looking at a living being that's suffering. We have the oath. We treat who we can save." "Corporal, that is not a person. That is military property. Stand down." "Sir, with respect, I disagree." Deho looked at Hana, who nodded. "We're bringing him in." "Corporal Deho, you are directly violating—" Deho shut off the communicator. "Get the medical kit. I'll start breaking these chains." For the next hour, the two humans worked frantically to stabilize Kale. Hana injected powerful painkillers directly into his bloodstream, while Deho used plasma cutters to remove the chains. They wrapped his wounds, stabilized his damaged cybernetics, and carefully monitored his vital signs. Kale watched them work. His tactical programming told him this made no sense. Humans were known for their emotional responses. But this level of effort for an enemy's abandoned equipment was illogical. They were risking their careers, possibly their lives, for a creature they had never met. Why? A transport vehicle arrived, driven by more humans who looked skeptical but followed their companion's lead. Together, they carefully loaded Kale onto a reinforced stretcher. Every movement sent fresh waves of agony through his body, but Hana kept talking to him in a soft voice. "Stay with us. You're going to be okay. We've got you now. We've got you." Those words echoed in Kale's fading consciousness. Someone had him. Someone cared if he lived or died. For the first time in his existence, Kale was not alone. As the transport carried him away from the battlefield toward the human medical facility, Kale's last conscious thought was simple and profound. These humans had seen a dying creature that every other species had walked past. They had looked at an abandoned weapon and seen someone worth saving. Maybe, Kale thought as darkness claimed him, maybe there was more to life than being a weapon after all. The transport rumbled across the scarred landscape, carrying the massive warhound toward an uncertain future. Behind them, the battlefield remained silent and still, a testament to the waste of war. But in that moment, two human medics had done something revolutionary in the cold calculus of galactic conflict. They had chosen compassion over efficiency. They had chosen life over orders. They had chosen to see a person where everyone else saw only a broken tool. And that choice would change everything. Kale woke to something he had never experienced before. The absence of pain. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the bright lights of the medical facility. The air smelled clean, sterile. Nothing like the blood and smoke of the battlefield. Soft beeping sounds came from monitoring equipment attached to his body. Everything felt wrong in the most wonderful way possible. For his entire existence, Kale had lived with constant pain. The Vralthian engineers had designed it that way. Pain kept warhounds obedient. Pain reminded them they were tools. The control implants in his spine delivered electric shocks if he hesitated to follow orders. The combat drugs in his system kept him aggressive, but left his nerves burning. Even sleep brought no relief. But now the pain was gone. Kale tried to move and found his strength slowly returning. His wounds had been carefully treated and bandaged. Someone had cleaned him, removing the dried blood and dirt from his armored hide. His cybernetic enhancements hummed softly, repaired and functioning properly for the first time in months. "Easy there," a voice said. Hana appeared beside his medical bed, checking the monitors. "You've been out for 2 days. Your body needed time to heal." Kale tried to speak, but his damaged vocal systems only produced a low rumble. Frustration filled him. He had so many questions. Hana seemed to understand. She pulled out a data pad and activated a simple program with pictures and words. "Can you understand this? Touch what you want to say." Kale carefully extended one clawed finger and touched the screen. The pad was tiny in his massive hand, but he managed to select the image that meant where. "You're at the human forward operating base on Viridian 7, Hana explained. "After we found you, we brought you here. Our doctors have been working around the clock to save you." Another touch. "Why?" Hana smiled sadly. "Because you needed help. That's what we do." The concept made no sense to Kale's tactical programming. Resources were meant to be used efficiently. Medical supplies were precious. Wasting them on abandoned enemy equipment violated every military protocol he had been taught. The door opened and a human in an officer's uniform entered. The name patch identified him as Captain Tae-min. He was older than Daeho and Hana, with gray streaking his dark hair and tired eyes that had seen too much war. "How's our patient?" Tae-min asked. "Stable and conscious," Hana replied. "His body is responding well to treatment." Tae-min approached Kale's bed. The warhound tensed instinctively. Officers meant orders, and orders meant pain if you failed to obey quickly enough. But Tae-min just pulled up a chair and sat down, making himself smaller and less threatening. "I'm Captain Tae-min," he said calmly. "I want to talk to you about your situation. You're not property here. You're a patient. That means you have rights. Do you understand?" Kale stared at him. Rights? The word existed in his tactical database, but it had never applied to him. Rights were for people. He was a weapon. "I know this is confusing," Tae-min continued. "The Vralthians created you to be a soldier. They treated you like equipment. But humans see things differently. We believe that if something can think and feel, it's a person, and people can't be owned." The door burst open and 3 alien figures entered. Kale recognized them immediately. Vralthians. Their tall, gray-skinned bodies and cold, calculating eyes were burned into his memory. The leader wore the insignia of an ambassador. "Captain Tae-min," the Vralthian said sharply. "I am Ambassador Silthar. I am here to reclaim Vralthian military property." Tae-min stood slowly. "The warhound is not property. He's a patient under our care." "Ridiculous," Silthar's voice dripped with contempt. "Warhounds are genetically engineered military assets. They belong to the Vralthian remnant forces. Your interference is theft." "You abandoned him to die," Tae-min said quietly, but his voice carried steel. "You chained him to a bunker and left him bleeding on the battlefield. You gave up any claim when you decided he wasn't worth saving." "The unit was damaged beyond efficient repair," Silthar replied. "The cost of evacuation exceeded its value. This is standard military procedure." "He has a name," Hana interjected. "Kyle. We found his designation in his cybernetic systems. He's not an it or a unit, he's Kale." The Vralthians looked at her with something close to pity. "You humans and your emotions? Warhounds are weapons. They have designations, not names. They follow programming, not thoughts. Returning this unit is required under Galactic Union law." Tae-min shook his head. "Human law says sentient beings cannot be property." Kale showed clear signs of fear, pain, and understanding. "That makes him sentient. We're offering him asylum." "This is unacceptable." Silthar's composure cracked. "You cannot simply steal military assets because your primitive culture has soft feelings about weapons. The Galactic Council will hear of this." "Good," Tae-min said firmly. "Let them hear. Let them hear how you create sentient beings just to treat them as disposable tools. Let them hear how you implant torture devices to keep them obedient. Let them hear how you abandon them to die when they're no longer convenient." The Vralthians left in cold fury, promising political consequences. Kale watched the confrontation with growing confusion. Tae-min had risked diplomatic problems for him. Hana had called him by name. They were treating him like he mattered. Over the following days, more humans came to help Kale. An engineer named Jiwon spent hours working on his cybernetic systems. What she found made her physically ill. "Daeho, come look at this," Jiwon called out. She displayed the scans of Kale's internal systems on a large screen. "These aren't just enhancements. They're control mechanisms." Daeho studied the images, his expression growing darker. "What am I looking at?" "Explosive implants in his spine, pain compliance systems throughout his nervous system, memory suppressors in his brain. These aren't for his benefit. They're to keep him enslaved." G1 pointed to another section. "And look here!" His natural brain structures show signs of advanced intelligence. Before they started suppressing and conditioning him, Kale was probably as smart as any of us. They didn't just use him. They lobotomized him to make him more controllable. "Can you remove these systems?" Daeho asked. "Most of them, yes. But it'll take time. And there's no telling what he'll remember once the suppressors are gone." "Do it," Daeho said. "He deserves to know who he really is." The procedures took 3 days. Each time Jiwon removed another control system, Kyle felt something returning. Memories, emotions, thoughts that were his own, not programmed responses. It was terrifying and liberating at the same time. He remembered being young, not created in a pod, but born. He remembered others like him, a pack, a family. He remembered playing and learning and being treated with kindness. The Vralthian Empire had created warhounds as companions once, not slaves. But after the Empire fell, the remnant forces had twisted the breeding program into something dark. Hana visited every day, teaching Kale to communicate better. She introduced him to basic sign language, using his clawed hands to form simple words and ideas. It was slow and frustrating, but each new word felt like freedom. "How do you feel?" Hana asked one day, signing the question along with speaking it. Kale's claws moved carefully, forming the signs she had taught him. "Confused, scared, free." Hana smiled. "That's normal. You've been through a lot. But you're safe now. No one here will hurt you." "Why help me?" Kale signed. "I am weapon." "Were," Hana corrected gently. "You were treated as a weapon. But you're a person, Kale. You have thoughts and feelings. You have a right to choose your own path." Choice. Another alien concept. Kale had never chosen anything. His entire existence had been following orders, completing missions, serving purposes that others decided for him. The idea that he could choose was overwhelming. That night, Kale lay in his medical bed staring at the ceiling. The pain was gone. The control implants were gone. The fear of punishment for disobedience was fading. For the first time in his conscious existence, Kale's thoughts were his own. The humans had given him something more precious than medical care. They had given him the possibility of being more than a weapon. They had looked at a creature designed for destruction and seen someone worth saving, worth teaching, worth treating with kindness. Kale made a decision then. His first real choice. If he survived this, if he healed, he would find a way to thank these strange, compassionate humans. He would prove that their faith in him was not misplaced. He would become more than what the Vralthians had made him. He would become who he chose to be. The alarms woke Kale from a restless sleep. Red lights flashed throughout the medical facility as soldiers rushed past his room. The sound of distant explosions rumbled through the walls. "All personnel to battle stations. The Krathon swarm is attacking in force." Kale rose from his bed, his body still weak but much stronger than days ago. Through the window he could see the night sky lit up with weapons fire. The Krathon were a hive-mind species, endless waves of insect warriors that valued nothing but expansion and consumption. They were one of the few enemies that every galactic species feared. Hana rushed into his room, already dressed in combat armor. "Kale, stay here. The facility has shields. You'll be safe." But Kale could hear the battle intensifying. His enhanced hearing picked up human voices shouting orders, calling for medical support, crying out in pain. The sounds triggered something deep in his combat programming, but also something new. These humans had saved him. They had treated him with kindness. They were fighting to protect each other and protect him. He had a choice now. He could stay safe while they fought, or he could help. Kale moved toward the door. Hana tried to stop him. "You're not healed yet. You don't have to fight. You're not a soldier anymore." Kale's claws formed the signs she had taught him. "I choose." He pushed past her gently and headed toward the sound of battle. His massive body moved through the corridors, drawing stares from human soldiers rushing the other direction. But no one tried to stop him. They had bigger problems. Outside, the battlefield was chaos. The Krathon swarm attacked in waves of chittering blade-limbed warriors. Each one stood 8 feet tall with razor-sharp appendages that could slice through armor. They moved with horrifying coordination, their hive mind making them nearly impossible to outmaneuver. The human defensive line was holding, but barely. Kale could see soldiers falling back, their ammunition running low. He spotted Deho in the thick of fighting, using his medical training to pull wounded soldiers to safety, while still firing his weapon at the approaching Krathon. A group of Krathon warriors broke through the line, heading straight for Deho's position. The medic was focused on treating a wounded soldier and didn't see them coming. Kale charged. His 12-foot frame crashed into the Krathon like a landslide. Claws that could tear through tank armor ripped into the insect warriors. His powerful jaws clamped down on one Krathon, crushing its thorax. The other warriors turned to face this new threat, but Kale fought with a fury they weren't prepared for. This was what he had been created to do, but for the first time, he was fighting for something he believed in rather than following programmed orders. He was protecting people who had shown him kindness. He was choosing to be their shield. "Kyle," Deho shouted in surprise. "What are you doing here?" Kale positioned himself between the medic and the approaching Krathon, signing quickly. "Protect pack." Deho understood immediately. He finished stabilizing the wounded soldier and took position beside Kale, firing at any Krathon that got too close. "All right then. Let's do this together." They fought back-to-back, human and warhound, medic and former weapon. Kale's combat instincts told him where threats would come from. Deho's quick thinking found weak points in the Krathon formation. Together, they held the line when it should have broken. Other human soldiers saw what was happening and rallied around them. A young lieutenant named Minho organized his squad to provide covering fire. "Protect our boy," he shouted, pointing at Kale. The phrase spread through the human ranks like wildfire. "Protect our boy." They weren't just fighting alongside Kale anymore. They were fighting for him, just as he was fighting for them. Sergeant Boyoung, a tough veteran with scars across her face, directed her heavy weapons team to support Kale's position. "That big guy is holding the center. Don't let anything get past him." The battle raged for hours. Kale's body screamed in protest as new wounds opened alongside his healing ones. Krathon blades found gaps in his armored hide. His cybernetics sparked and overheated from constant use. But he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. Not while humans were still fighting beside him. A massive Krathon warrior, bigger than the others and marked with leader markings, pushed through the swarm toward Kale. This was a hive commander, a rare and dangerous variant that controlled dozens of lesser warriors. If it fell, the attack might falter. Kyle and the commander clashed in a brutal melee. The Krathon's blades cut deep into Kale's shoulders. One of Kale's cybernetic limbs sparked and failed. But he pressed forward, using his superior weight and strength to force the commander back. Deho saw Kale struggling and made a split-second decision. He pulled a plasma grenade from his belt and threw it at the commander's feet. "Kale down!" The warhound dropped as the grenade exploded, engulfing the Krathon commander in superheated plasma. The creature's death scream echoed across the battlefield. Without their leader, the other Krathon warriors faltered, their coordination breaking down. The human soldiers pressed their advantage. With Kale leading the counterattack, they pushed the Krathon back. Step by bloody step, they reclaimed ground and drove the swarm away from the base. As dawn broke, the Krathon finally retreated. The battlefield fell silent except for the groans of wounded and the crackle of burning equipment. Kale stood in the center of the defensive line, his massive body covered in wounds and gore. He swayed slightly, exhaustion finally catching up with him. Deho rushed to his side. "Medic! We need medical support here." "I'm fine," Kale signed weakly. "Like hell you are," Deho replied. "You're bleeding everywhere. Sit down before you fall down." Hana arrived with a medical team. She looked at Kale with a mixture of anger and pride. "You idiot. You were supposed to stay safe." Kale's claws moved slowly. "Had to help. You helped me." As the medics worked to stabilize his wounds, other soldiers approached. Sergeant Boyoung sat down heavily beside Kale, wincing from her own injuries. "You didn't have to do that, you know. You could have stayed inside where it was safe." Kale looked at her and signed simply. "Neither did you." Boyoung laughed despite her pain. "Fair point. But that's our job. We signed up for this." "I choose," Kale signed. "I choose to fight for you." Lieutenant Minho overheard and called out to his exhausted squad. "You hear that? The big guy chose to be here. Chose to protect us. How many of our so-called allies can say the same?" The human soldiers nearby began to cheer, a ragged sound but genuine. They had won against impossible odds, and they had done it together with a creature that every other species had dismissed as broken equipment. Captain Taman arrived to survey the battlefield. He saw Kale being treated by the medics, saw the bodies of dozens of Krathon around the warhound's position, saw the respect and affection on his soldiers' faces as they looked at their unlikely defender. "Someone get this soldier proper armor," Taman ordered. "If Kale's going to keep fighting with us, he deserves better protection than those old Vralthian systems." "Sir," Deho said carefully, "does this mean he's officially one of us?" Taman looked at Kale, then at his troops, then back to Kale. "He was one of us from the moment you two refused to leave him on that battlefield. Today he just made it official by choice rather than necessity." As the sun rose fully over Viridian 7, the human soldiers and one Vralthian warhound sat together, sharing water and rations, treating each other's wounds, and simply existing in each other's presence. They were exhausted, bloody, and battered, but they were alive. Kale had learned something crucial during that long night of battle. The Vralthians had created him to be a weapon, but the humans had shown him he could be more. They had given him choice, and he had chosen to stand with them. Not because he had to, but because he wanted to. For the first time in his existence, Kale understood what it meant to have a family. Not the genetic pack he barely remembered from his suppressed childhood, but a family of choice. These humans who fought beside him, who called him our boy, who risked themselves to keep him safe just as he did for them. He was no longer just a weapon. He was a guardian, a protector, a friend. He was home. News traveled fast across the human military networks. Within a week, every human unit in the sector had heard the story of the warhound named Kale, who fought alongside the 3rd Expeditionary Corps. They heard how human medics had rescued him from certain death. They heard how he had chosen to protect them during the Krathon attack. More importantly, they started looking at other battlefields differently. On the moon of Tyrannus IV, a human patrol found another Vralthian warhound chained inside a bombed-out bunker. The creature was barely alive, missing one limb and covered in chemical burns. Private Yunji, remembering the story of Daiho and Hana, refused to leave the warhound behind. Her squad spent 6 hours extracting the injured creature and bringing it back to their base. On the asteroid belt near Helios Station, Marines discovered 3 warhounds locked in a damaged transport ship, left to suffocate when the life support failed. Sergeant Giwan personally overrode his commanding officer's orders to abandon them, cutting through the ship's hull to reach the dying creatures. On Kepler 7, a human engineering team found a warhound being used as live target practice by Vralthian trainers. The trainers claimed they were testing weapons on defective equipment. The human engineers disagreed strongly, and the disagreement ended with the trainers in detention and the warhound in medical care. Each rescue followed the same pattern. Humans saw suffering where other species saw broken tools. They offered help where others offered nothing. And slowly, impossibly, the rescued warhounds began to heal. Back at the main human base on Viridian 7, Kale found himself with a new purpose. Captain Tayman had assigned him to help with the rehabilitation of the other rescued warhounds. Kale's unique perspective, his understanding of both what warhounds had been and what they could become, made him the perfect teacher. The first rescued warhound to arrive was massive, even by warhound standards. They called him Striker, taking the designation from his damaged collar. Striker was aggressive, scared, and completely unable to trust anyone. His handlers had been particularly cruel, using extreme pain compliance to keep him controlled. Kale approached Striker carefully in the secure rehabilitation area. The other warhound snarled and backed against the wall, his eyes wild with fear and rage. Kale sat down slowly, making himself less threatening despite his size. He began to sign even though Striker didn't understand yet. Hana stood nearby, ready to translate. "You are safe now," Kyle signed, and Hana spoke the words. "The humans will not hurt you. They saved me." "They can save you too," Striker growled. "Lies, all lies. Masters return. Punishment comes." "They are not your masters anymore," Kale replied. "You have no masters here. Only friends." It took weeks, but slowly Striker began to understand. He watched how the humans treated Kale with respect and kindness. He saw how they removed his pain implants carefully and gently. He learned that refusing orders didn't bring electric shocks or beatings, just patient explanations and gentle redirections. More warhounds arrived. Each one was broken in different ways. Some were violent, lashing out at anyone who came near. Others were catatonic, their spirits completely crushed by years of abuse. A few were young, barely past the conditioning phase, not yet fully broken but well on their way. Kyle worked with all of them. He taught them sign language so they could communicate. He showed them that the pain could stop, that they could make choices, that they could be more than weapons. And gradually, the rehabilitation center became something special. It became a pack. Private Hana continued to work closely with Kale. She had become the primary human liaison for the Warhound program, learning to understand their needs and psychology. One afternoon, she brought a young human engineer named Soman to meet Kale. Soman was small even by human standards, barely reaching 5 feet tall. She had bright, curious eyes and an enthusiasm that reminded Kale of something from his suppressed memories. She approached without fear, carrying a datapad full of designs. "Hi, Kale," Soman said cheerfully. "Hana tells me you might need better armor. I've been working on some designs. Want to see?" Kale nodded and leaned down to look at the datapad. Soman's designs were incredible. She had created modular armor that would protect his vulnerable points without restricting movement. She had designed new cybernetic limbs to replace his damaged ones. She had even included systems for communication and medical monitoring. "This is amazing," Kale signed. Hana translated. Soman beamed. "I want to help. What the Vralthians did to you and the others, it's wrong. If I can make things better even a little bit, I want to do that." Over the following months, Samin became a regular presence in the rehabilitation center. She fitted each warhound with custom armor and equipment. But more than that, she talked to them like people. She learned their preferences, their fears, their dreams for the future. She treated them with the same casual kindness she showed her human colleagues. The bond between Kale and Soman grew strong. She reminded him of something from his earliest preconditioning memories. A Vralthian companion, young and enthusiastic, who had played with him before the Empire fell and everything changed. Soman couldn't replace that lost friend, but she filled a similar space in his heart. The political situation, however, was deteriorating. The Vralthian remnant government had formally charged the humans with theft of military assets. The case was brought before the Galactic Council, the governing body that theoretically kept peace among the spacefaring species. Captain Taman and Kale were called to testify. The hearing was held on the neutral station called Unity 1, a massive structure where the council met. Kale had never seen so many different species in one place. Insectoids, crystalline beings, gas-form entities, and dozens of others all gathered to hear the case. The Vralthian representative, Ambassador Silthar, presented his argument first. The humans have systematically stolen Vralthian military property. Warhounds are genetically engineered weapons, created and owned by the Vralthian state. Their unauthorized removal from Vralthian control constitutes theft and violates multiple treaties. Captain Taman stood to respond. Warhounds are sentient beings capable of thought, emotion, and choice. Under human law and basic moral principles, sentient beings cannot be property. We have not stolen equipment. We have rescued people from slavery and abuse. The council members murmured among themselves. This was unprecedented territory. Most species use some form of engineered or uplifted beings, and the question of where tools ended and people began made everyone uncomfortable. The council recognizes Captain Taman's perspective, the council speaker said. However, galactic law is clear. Engineered beings belong to their creators unless proven sapient by recognized standards. Then let's prove it, Taman said. Allow Kale to speak for himself. The chamber fell silent. Allowing a warhound to address the council was unthinkable. But the speaker, intrigued, agreed. Very well. The warhound may approach. Kale walked to the center of the chamber. Every eye in the room followed his massive form. He stood where countless ambassadors and leaders had stood before him. But he was neither ambassador nor leader. He was simply a person trying to tell his truth. Hana stood beside him, ready to translate his signs into spoken words. I was created to be a weapon, Kale began, his claws forming the signs carefully. I was bred, conditioned, and programmed to follow orders without question. Pain implants kept me obedient. Memory suppressors kept me from remembering who I was before the conditioning. I existed only to serve and die for masters who saw me as equipment. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Then I was damaged. No longer useful. My handlers chained me to a bunker and left me to die. They did not think twice. I was broken equipment to be discarded. But humans found me. 2 medics who could have left me, who had orders to leave me, chose to help. They gave me medical care. They removed the implants that caused me pain. They taught me to communicate. They showed me kindness. Kyle's signs grew more emphatic. For the first time I could choose. I could think thoughts that were my own. I could feel things beyond pain and obedience. When battle came, I chose to fight. Not because I was ordered, not because I was programmed. I chose to protect the people who had shown me compassion. You ask if I am property or person. I ask you this. Can property choose? Can property feel gratitude? Can property make friends? Can property dream of a future beyond its programming? The chamber was completely silent now. Every being present was listening intently. "I am Kale," he signed. "I am more than what I was created to be, and there are others like me, suffering under the belief that they are only weapons. If this council rules that we are property, you are ruling that compassion is theft and slavery is legal. You are saying that anyone created rather than born has no rights, no choices, no value beyond their usefulness." Kyle looked directly at Ambassador Silthar. "You made my body, but you did not make my soul. The humans taught me that I have one." The council debated for 3 days. The vote was close, but finally they reached a decision. The speaker announced the ruling to a packed chamber. "The Galactic Council has determined that beings demonstrating sapient-level thought, emotional capacity, and autonomous choice cannot be classified as property regardless of their origin. The warhounds in human custody are granted full legal protection as sentient beings. The charges against humanity are dismissed." The Vralthian delegation walked out in fury, but others stayed, asking questions considering what this meant for their own engineered or uplifted species. The council's ruling would have implications far beyond warhounds. For Kale and the others, it meant something simpler and more profound. It meant freedom. It meant recognition. It meant that their choice to leave slavery behind was legally protected. On the flight back to Viridian 7, Kyle sat with Deho, Hana, and Soman. They were exhausted but hopeful. "What will you do now?" Soman asked. "You're free. You can go anywhere, do anything." Kale's answer was immediate and certain. "Stay with Pack. Stay with family." Because that's what they were. Not just soldiers or colleagues, but family. A family he had chosen and who had chosen him in return. The intelligence report arrived 6 months after the Galactic Council's ruling. It came from a Vralthian defector, someone who had grown disgusted with their government's response to losing the Warhound case. Captain Taemin read the report with growing horror. "They're accelerating the program, creating new warhounds with even more extreme control measures, and they're doing it on Vralthia Prime." Kale looked at the images included in the report. Rows of pods where young warhounds were being grown and conditioned. Laboratories where new pain-compliant systems were being tested. Training facilities where creatures barely out of the growth pods were being brutalized into obedience. "We have to stop this," Deho said quietly. "It's on their homeworld," Lieutenant Minho pointed out. "That's sovereign territory. We'd be starting a war." "They're creating people just to torture them into being weapons," Hana replied, her voice shaking with anger. "We have to do something." Kale's claws moved in decisive signs. "Rescue them, like you rescued me." Taemin looked at the warhound. "It would be dangerous. The facility is heavily guarded. We'd be going into the heart of Vralthian space. Even with authorization from Earth Command, which I'm not sure we'd get, the risks are enormous. I go." Kale signed. "They are my people. I must help them." Over the next month, a plan formed. It couldn't be an official military operation. Earth Command would never approve an assault on Vralthia Prime. But there were ways to accomplish things unofficially. Volunteers, equipment that went missing from inventory, transport ships on training missions that took unexpected detours. The team assembled in secret. Taemin led the humans. Deho and Hana volunteered immediately. Soman insisted on coming as the engineering specialist. Sergeant Boyoung brought her combat experience. Lieutenant Minho coordinated logistics. A dozen other human soldiers volunteered, all of them veterans who had worked with the rescued warhounds. And there were the warhounds themselves. Kyle stood at the front, but he wasn't alone. Stryker had recovered enough to fight. So had 6 others, each rescued from abandonment or abuse. They all chose to join the mission. They all wanted to save others like themselves. The journey to Vralthia Prime took 2 weeks. They traveled in a salvaged transport ship, staying off major trade routes, using every trick they knew to avoid detection. During the long flight, Kale spent time with each member of the team. He found Soman in the engineering bay one night working on modifications to his armor. She looked up and smiled when he entered. "Can't sleep?" she asked. Kale shook his head. He signed slowly. "Scared. What if we fail? What if more suffer because of me?" Soman set down her tools and walked over to him. She placed one small hand on his massive armored limb. "We might fail. But if we don't try, they definitely suffer. You taught me that. You taught all of us. Sometimes the right thing to do is also the scary thing to do." Kale looked down at this tiny human who had become so important to him. Thank you. For everything. For seeing me as person. Always, Soman replied. Your family, Kale. That's what family does. The assault on the facility was planned for the Vralthian night cycle. The team landed several miles away from the target and approached on foot. Stryker and the other warhounds knew the facility's layout from their own painful memories. They guided the humans through weak points in the security. The first alarm didn't sound until they were already inside. Vralthian security forces responded quickly, but they weren't prepared for the combination of human tactics and warhound ferocity. The defenders had been trained to control warhounds through pain and intimidation. They didn't know how to fight warhounds who were choosing to fight back. Kyle led the charge through the facility. Every corridor brought back terrible memories, but he pushed forward. They had to reach the conditioning labs before security could harm the young warhounds being held there. They encountered Commander Talvek in the main laboratory. The cold Vralthian officer who had abandoned Kale on the battlefield now stood between them and the rows of pods containing young warhounds. You, Talvek said, recognizing Kale. I should have destroyed you when I had the chance. You were always defective, too much independent thought. That's why you broke so easily. Kale advanced slowly, his massive frame blocking the corridor. He signed and Deho translated. I did not break, you did. You broke your own principles. You broke the trust of beings you created. You broke everything that made the warhounds great. Talvek laughed bitterly. Great? We made you to serve. That's all you are. That's all you'll ever be. You made my body, Kale signed. Humans taught me I have a soul. The fight was brief. Talvek had weapons and security training, but he had never faced a warhound fighting for something it believed in. Kale didn't kill him. That would make him no better than what the Vralthians had tried to create. Instead, he disabled the commander and moved past, leaving him for the human soldiers to secure. In the laboratory, they found 30 young warhounds in various stages of conditioning. Some were barely conscious, kept sedated during the growth process. Others were awake but trapped in virtual reality scenarios designed to break their spirits and reinforce obedience. Get them out, Taman ordered. All of them. We're not leaving anyone behind. Soman and Hana worked frantically to disconnect the young warhounds from their pods. Each one required careful extraction to avoid damaging them. Security forces were closing in, but Stryker and the other rescued warhounds held the perimeter, giving the humans time to work. The facility's self-destruct system activated. Apparently, the Vralthians would rather destroy the evidence than let it fall into human hands. The team had minutes to evacuate. They ran through the collapsing facility, carrying the sedated young warhounds, fighting through security forces, racing against time. Explosions rocked the building as they emerged into the night. Their transport ship swooped in, and they loaded everyone aboard just as the facility erupted in flames behind them. The escape from Vralthia Prime was harrowing. Pursuit ships followed them, but the human pilot, a veteran named Kyung-soo, managed to lose them in the asteroid belt surrounding the planet. By the time they made it to human space, the team was exhausted but triumphant. The rescued warhounds woke up slowly over the following days. They were young, confused, and terrified, but they woke up in a place where people treated them with kindness. They woke up to Kale's gentle presence, to Hana's patient explanations, to Soman's cheerful engineering assistance. They woke up free. The political fallout was significant. The Vralthian government accused humanity of terrorism, but the evidence the team brought back, images and recordings of the abuse in the facility, turned public opinion across the galaxy. Other species began questioning their own practices. Reform started slowly but surely. More importantly, the rescue inspired others. Sympathetic individuals from various species began helping engineered beings escape abuse. Underground networks formed to help those seeking freedom. The movement spread far beyond warhounds. 6 months after the raid, the human government officially granted warhounds the option of citizenship. Kale was among the first to accept. In a ceremony on Earth, he received an official rank, honorary sergeant. It was symbolic, but the symbolism mattered. It meant recognition. It meant belonging. After the ceremony, Kale stood with Deho overlooking a sunset on Earth. The human homeworld was beautiful in ways that Kale had never imagined. Green forests, blue oceans, and endless skies free from the smoke of war. What will you do now? Deho asked. You're free. You're a citizen. You have choices that most beings only dream about. Kale's claws moved in the signs he had practiced. Stay with you. Stay with Hana. Stay with Soman. Stay with Pack. You sure? Deho smiled. You could retire. Live peacefully. Never fight again. Not ready for peace yet, Kyle signed. Others still need help. Others still think they are only weapons. Want to show them they are more? Deho nodded. Then we'll do it together. The whole pack. That evening, the 3rd Expeditionary Corps held a memorial service. They honored all the warhounds who had died before they could be saved. Kale placed a marker with Vralthian script. Hana translated it for those who couldn't read the old language. They called us weapons. You called us brothers. We chose who we would be. The ceremony was attended by hundreds. Human soldiers who had rescued warhounds. The warhounds themselves now living freely. Representatives from other species who had been inspired by the movement. They stood together as the sun set, remembering those who had suffered and celebrating those who had survived. In the months and years that followed, Kale's story spread across the galaxy. It became a symbol of hope for anyone trapped by circumstances of their creation. It became a reminder that compassion could change the world. More warhounds found freedom. Many chose to remain with human military units, not as weapons but as volunteers and partners. Others pursued different paths. Some became engineers like Soman. Some became doctors like Hana. Some became teachers, artists, explorers. They became whatever they chose to be. Kale remained with his original pack. Deho, Hana, Somin, Boyung, Minho, and the others who had been there from the beginning. They continued to serve together, but now they served a cause they all believed in. They rescued those who needed rescuing. They stood up against injustice. They proved that compassion was not weakness but strength. On quiet nights when the missions were done and the battles were over, Kale would sometimes think about that battlefield where he had been left to die. He thought about how close he had come to ending as just another piece of broken equipment in an endless war. But 2 humans had seen something more. They had looked at a dying creature and seen someone worth saving. That single act of compassion had changed everything, not just for Kale but for hundreds of others like him. It had started a movement that was still growing, still spreading, still changing lives. Kale had learned many things from the humans. He had learned about choice, freedom, and dignity. He had learned about friendship and loyalty. He had learned that his value wasn't determined by his usefulness as a weapon, but by his choices as a person. Most importantly, he had learned what it meant to have a home. Not a place or a planet, but people. His pack, his family. Those who chose to stand beside him, just as he chose to stand beside them. As Kale looked at the stars from Earth, surrounded by those he loved, he finally understood what the humans had given him. They had given him the most precious gift any being could receive. They had given him himself, and he would spend the rest of his life making sure others received that same gift. One rescue at a time, one choice at a time, one act of compassion at a time. Because that's what family did. They helped each other. They saved each other. They chose each other, always.